Okay. Hey, fuckers. We're back again for another no bullshit episode discussing self defense mechanisms so far. So fucking what? How to use this information for compassionate healing of self and other, part two. So, quickly, let's review. The self defenses are a double edged sword. On one hand, you don't want to be out there defenseless. To become insane in insane circumstances is to be sane. There are times that we need to let our brains off the hook to keep marching forward. On the other hand, you don't want to use the wrong self defenses or to use them irresponsibly because doing the same thing and expecting different results is the definition of insanity. They stop being adaptive when they stop giving us the consequences that we need. So, we can use our knowledge of self defense mechanisms for understanding the games of others, understanding what defenses we want to engage within ourselves, and having compassion for self and other throughout. Here's a new point that I felt inclined to bring up. What can we use this knowledge for besides what I just stated? Permission to disregard the self defensive, cognitive, and emotional abuse of others. If they're not being an aware or accountable self, it requires us to be fucking saints who are perpetually traversing the high road, which comes with mental and emotional exhaustion, trying to sort out their disordered actions, right? We can drive ourselves nuts trying to think about things that other people refuse to think about themselves. So, recognizing when others chronically use defense mechanisms gives us the green light to take their bullshit with a big old grain of salt rather than mentally chasing their black and white rabbits. So, some advice that I enjoy in this vein of thought is don't disclose or try to process information with people you don't trust. But similarly, don't try to make sense of nonsensical people. Don't make yourself accountable for unaccountable people. So once you make the determination via long-term observation, reality testing, and careful reflection that someone perpetually spits vile/nonsense for their own kind of lazy purposes, you can enjoy the benefits of splitting, for instance, in disregarding what they say into the bullshit pile that doesn't require additional thought or processing on your part. So, just a piece of advice for all fuckers in this moment. You don't need to read or analyze everything that Donald Trump says, right? It'll drive you nuts. But it is still true that it behooves us to understand why these defenses exist in ourselves and others, so we don't demonize adults who are behaving as traumatized children, aka jackasses, and we can offer compassion for ourselves if we be the jackasses, while also getting closer to using high adaptive defenses that we haven't covered yet. So, we are back again in part two to discuss the low adaptive, immature, depressive defenses that we've covered previously in detail. We're on to the major image distorting defenses today, splitting and projective identification, and how to use this information for good. For each, we're going to discuss why the behavior exists, how to work with others who use this defense, and how to work with ourselves if we do. But quickly, I have to say, last we covered passive aggression. Next up is splitting. But I have a quick addition to the passive aggressive discussion because I forgot to discuss the non action taking version, the purposeful dropping of balls and procrastination and forgetting to do things aspects of passive aggression, which are all harder to spot and prove in real life because they are non actions. So I offer the same advice as for the snide passive aggression offered last time. But there's no need to reply to or comment about what they haven't done in super explicit terms, though I will give you an example of doing that. But the point of their not doing is that it can't be proven to be purposeful, right? So you'll really only start a battle with them if you try to call them out for it, which you will lose because you cannot tell other people what they really felt or thought or meant to do. You cannot. So instead, in non action taking passive aggression, I suggest that you, again, validate their worth in the same manner as you ask for their true opinion and thoughts and feelings, perspective, wisdoms, insights, etc. Perhaps with a slight nod to their inaction, but without being accusatory about it. As in, hey, I noticed that there seems to be a delay in the task they were supposed to accomplish. I was wondering if maybe you have some hangups about what you were asked to do. I would really appreciate hearing what you honestly think and feel. Again, making sure they know that they are important and it is safe for them to give their real opinion because you are directly asking for it. Okay, enough of that. Now let's move forward. We're going into splitting, which is a bit of a complicated conversation because it goes a lot of ways. So, understanding why in not so academic terms. With splitting, people were probably hot, cold, volatile, unpredictable in the individual's childhood. In order to make sense of the behaviors around them, the kiddo had to create stories that were momentarily vibe matching to what they were observing, but disjointed if they were sewn together long term. So they end up compartmentalizing their memories and judgments in order to survive each unpredictable moment and make sense of each strange, unpredictable experience. Presently, their mind still has a habit of doing this, rapidly reacting to new events with these extreme, incohesive assessments. And without further reflection on those assessments later, because that would be extremely anxiety provoking and threatening to their sense of survival. We also know that this often happens through the vehicle of contrasting comparisons, as in, they are good, I am bad. I am good, they are bad. So let's talk about why each one of these takes place. In the case of a negative self image and a positive other image, it was safest for them to lay low and accept humiliation and disregard the self in their earlier lives. Their caregiver experience was probably very domineering, with little to no opportunity for proving or validating their self. They may have been outright punished for any self confidence, autonomous behavioral displays, or happiness. So, this suggests a greater regard for / trust in others than they have for the thoughts and feelings of them, their self. It could also come with a real penchant for authority figures and deferring to them. In the case of a positive self image and a negative other image, the individual learned that it's dangerous to accept the opinions of others and may have accidentally found relief in rejecting their negativity, which then again becomes an automatic behavior because it's very rewarding. Their family of origin may have also been very domineering, but either rationalizations or real reasons exist where they learned to disrespect and dismiss their family's ideas and behaviors. It results in a mentality that says, they are wrong about this, idiots. I bet that they're wrong about me in all negative light. Or contradictorily, none of what I just said at all in the case of positive self image and negative other image. Instead, it's possible that someone filled their head with narratives of superiority, which probably was based on their own narcissism, and the child was just an extension of the adult who sees themselves as better than everyone else. So, therefore, their child obviously is too. Ways to work with them. In the case of a positive self image and a negative other image, it's rough. Good luck with the superior minded folks, because as we know, narcissists are unlikely to change. And if they are not narcissists, I mean, who wants to be the guy who's charged themselves with bringing this individual's self perception into a more realistically negative light, right? I'm really going to bring this person down. Ugh, yikes. But you can bring the individual's perceptions of others up into a more realistic, positive light instead. If they lean towards devaluing other humans with incohesive narratives, remind them of what they're excluding from the stories. Oh, really? They said that? Huh. Maybe it was just an off day, because I remember a few years, days, weeks ago when they fill in a positive example. Or, yeah, I guess that could be a moment of dickishness on their part for sure. But also remember the time that positive example. Or, yeah, I hear ya, but I doubt that they're a complete idiot all the time. Everyone has reasons for the ways that they behave. We might just not have all the information. In fact, I guarantee that we don't. In other words, when people have a positive self image and a negative other image, try to balance them out. But you don't need to bring them down. You can bring others up, landing in the gray tones and discussing the complex realities of life and human beings. Will they suddenly be able to merge their positive and negative opinions and memories? No. Will they suddenly see themselves realistically? No, most of us probably don't. But over time, they might pick up on the pattern. They're just going to bring up some contradictory and complicating information about this person, place, thing, event. So I might as well keep my mouth shut, slash settle down, slash try to reflect more before I speak or act, or else I'm somehow being the bad guy. Did they just accidentally open their mind to a new possibility? It could happen. Now, if you are the purely negatively seen other, here's the big question. Do you want to weather long-term abuse? If not, probably walk away. It is the safest thing to do. If you can and will take it, then I recommend you behave in positive ways forever, always. And maybe someday it will challenge their defense mechanism. Take the high road and hope eventually, someday, somehow, it makes an impression. probably when they have no one else and are forced to reappraise you more fairly. But if that does ever happen, remember their penchant for splitting. Be prepared for that perspective to flip back over. All right. Now let's talk about ways to work with them in the opposite scenario. If they split with a negative view of self and a positive view of other. Hey, good news. It's easier, it's healthier, it's kind of fulfilling, it's less abusive to endure, but it can be very exhausting over time to be the stand in self esteem for someone who doesn't really have any. So remind the individual of their worth and their quote, goodness when they become rigidly self negative. Bring up explicit examples to cement it in reality. Don't just say, no, you're good. You're a nice person, because that means nothing. Name things that you really admire about them. Call attention to positive qualities that they definitely have that they cannot see themselves. Again, help to balance out their perceptions. This works great in the face of how they see other people as well. So, others aren't always great, and they themselves, as the individual, is not always bad. But also, in a broader sense, try to help them break the whole good bad fallacy existing at all. No one, no one is all good or all bad. We are all just flawed, fallible, and delightful humans. All of us. So superiority and ranking does not exist except when we give that power to others in our minds. And make sure that they know that. So, yes, be a cheerleader, but keep it realistic. Don't help them create a narcissistic self opinion on accident. And reiterate the complexity and nuance of every person, place, thing in life. Almost nothing is black and white, except for judgments such as rape is bad, child abuse is wrong. We can all accept those things. It's safe. Now, ways to work with you if you are a splitter. I would say you should also work on this good bad fallacy overall, day after day in various situations, in response to others and yourself. Remind your mind. No one is all good or all bad. We are just flawed, that should say fallible, and delightful humans, all of us, you included. Again, superiority and ranking does not actually exist, except when we give that power to others in our minds. So reiterate reasonably versus all of humanity this simple phrase, quote, I'm fine. I'm not the best. I'm not the worst. You know what? I am safely in the gray tones. I'm fine. When you're feeling pervasively self negative, try to change your emotional state to allow access to other thoughts and memories in whatever ways you can do that in the tools that you have in your belt. You might think of one thing that you're definitely good at, for example, or one example where you definitely have helped somebody in a positive way. You might want to check out that adaptive narcissism series for some help when we talked about finding realistic, healthy points of vanity. You can also do something like looking at old photos, remembering people who love you and the reasons why, running through a highlight reel of your most impactful accomplishments, things like that. And contact a friend / your therapist when you need a boost. Now, ways to work with you if you have a very positive image of you. When you're wildly self-righteous, remember your humanness. Again, ain't none of us that great. I mean, don't go deep diving into your shame pit by all means, but check your opinion versus evidence in consensus reality. You might also call the underlying reality and measurement of your evidence into question, such as, you know, if I really was smarter than everyone, like that thought I just had in my head said, realistically, how would that even be judged? Aren't there many types of intellect? Am I really the best ever out of billions of people across the board? Even in this one highly specific way, seems unlikely. And as far as splitting in general, remember that when in doubt, you can always recall the fate that awaits us all. All of us are compost in the making. As wonderful as you and anyone else is right now, it is a time bound and limited perspective, anyways. Before your life or their life started, we were all equals, and the great equalizer awaits in the future. So, really harp on the complexity and unknowingness of being alive as often as you can in your own mental script if you do tend to be a black and white, good and bad thinker. Remind yourself all the time no human, no shit relative to what we do not know. This is true for individuals and humanity as a species. Anything that we are, quote, 100% sure about only appears that way because we're lacking information or the ability to comprehend more. And strict opinions indicate nothing but fear and foolishness. In general, be open minded, embrace the phrase, I don't know, but I'm willing to think about it and give it more time. Anything else is a defensive refusal to see inconvenient and complicating data. All right, that was a long one, but that was splitting. And up next, we have projective identification, which it turns out gets pretty emotional and heavy as we discuss it. So, buckle up. Understanding why people projectively identify. The individual probably grew up in a household where guilt, shame, and causality were very significant, i.e., you only deserve compassion and can only have feelings if the antecedent events qualify you for it. Those events cannot be in any way perceived as your fault, nor can your emotions be considered overly dramatic by anyone, or else insert some sort of punishment here. Therefore, the individual learns to look for evidence of external criteria that permit their emotions to exist. They need to have a good enough, bulletproof reason why they feel the way they feel. If someone or something else provokes their emotion, and an observer can be convinced of the provocation taking place, then the individual is, quote, safe, in other words, qualified to have that feeling. And therefore, this pattern develops. Now, in the case of goading another person to demonstrate that projected feeling in order for it to be qualified to exist, the reasoning is if someone else displays their emotion, then the individual feels justified, safe, qualified, maybe even required to react similarly. Other people's emotions have value / must be responded to. I was just meeting them where they were at. Or they might believe all emotions are inconvenient, unpredictable, pointless. So I'm still justified in reacting to the demonstration of theirs. Overall, the feeling can't just originate in me or my thoughts, wants, needs, opinions, experiences. It has to be convincingly inspired by someone or something else for it to be valid. It, again, is a very sad and abuse obvious mindset to have. P.S. Projective identification can also be a way to connect for people who don't know how to do it otherwise. Hey, we're both having this unpleasant emotion right now together, with outrage, annoyance, entitlement, fear, and helplessness being pretty common examples. So, ways to work with them if someone else is a projective identifier. I mean, don't let them get your goat, is the simplest advice. If they can't identify their emotion through you, through making you express the emotion instead of themselves, then they hit a roadblock. But this is easier said than done, and they're likely to escalate their behaviors until they do get the reaction that they want or need, or some sort of stand in reaction that allows them to distract themselves. So you might want to point out their provocation, but gently and with emotional intelligence, right? Like, you know, I really wasn't feeling this way before, and I'm not sure that I really even do feel this way right now. I'm admittedly really bad at emotional boundaries. Is there any chance that you've been feeling this way lately? Or, hey, I don't want to assume that I know your thoughts or feelings, but it seems like something is going on and it's registering in my system too. I just want you to know that whatever, I don't know, might be happening, it's valid and it's important. And I'm interested in knowing how you're doing. When in doubt, in the face of becoming reactive or in response to a negative reaction, if those sentiments fail, remove yourself from the situation. If you are not there for them to project uponst, then they might be forced to sit with their own feelings and reckon with the real roots. Maybe. But be sure to let them know that you are still there for them. You care. You want to talk about it from a less emotional place. They are valid and you love them no matter what internal experiences they have, based on any external experiences that they've ever had as well. Beware that it's likely that they will find someone new to project upon or with if you make yourself unavailable or exit the situation. And their projected emotion might now be a very negative one, quote, from your refusal to play along. In other words, you can become the simple projection object that's being used in their next projective identification experience. But don't worry, because none of it is reflective of reality. Okay, here's where things get kind of heavy. Ways to work with you if you are a projective identifier. In the moment, it's going to be pretty difficult to break this pattern. Of course, take a breath before you react and see the insert pause tips that were given in the last episode about action taking. Try to place the feeling in your system. Recall honestly if it's possible that tickling, some sort of itch, was already there before this event or interaction began. Acknowledge your possible penchant for emotional enmeshment and, quote, starting shit to enable your own emotional expression. via lessons that were probably learned in your early life. And please keep in mind, it's okay. You're not alone. A lot of people do this, and there are reasons why we learned to. It's okay. But you probably have some deep work to do, preferably before you are in the projection state of mind. At that point, it's really unclear what is happening and who the feeling belongs to. So, here are some questions to reflect on now in preparation for everything in your future. Why don't your internal events feel valid enough? Do you have a history of being asked to qualify your emotional events or to somehow prove that you should feel that way? What do you fear will happen if you voice or display your emotions without having a cut and dry story to explain them? Why is it easier to provoke others than it is to honor your own unmet needs, wants, preferences, feelings, pains, etc.? Each of these questions could be a year of reflection. I've got more. Do you have any fears that if I feel that feeling outright, I'll never be able to stop feeling it? Therefore, it's safer to have a microdose through observing/experiencing the feeling via someone else. And even bigger questions. Are you ever able to offer yourself empathy or compassion just because you feel the way that you feel? Or do you need a solid reason for yourself/permission from others to ever offer yourself empathy, compassion, or just the experience of your own emotions? If you just said, ooh, shit, that's me, who taught you that? Do you believe that it's a valid lesson? Or were they abusive jagholes who treated your feelings as burdensome inconveniences now that you have the knowledge and perspective to understand things more clearly? And a question that I love to ask: how are their relationships and lives faring, whoever it is who taught you this? So, all things considered, does it seem, quote, correct to continue treating yourself the way that they did, to continue this introjected abuse? Ways to work with you continued. The point is to create self-compassion. Practice having empathy for an externalized version of you if you can't have it for yourself. I recommend thinking of yourself as a scared or sad little animal of your choice, whatever really hits you in the heartstrings. Do they require a good enough reason to have their feelings? Or would you offer them care and concern regardless? Then practice bringing it back to the guy in the mirror. That was projective identification. Up next, processing everything that discussion just brought up, at least for me. So, on the self compassion note, let's all allow ourselves to feel the ways that we feel without first requiring reasonable qualifications or proof of total innocence in the matter. And this has been Self-Defense Mechanisms So Far, So Fucking What? How to Use This Information for Compassionate Healing of Self and Others, Parts 1 and 2. Next up, I think we're going to take a little side quest into the self-defense mechanism that has defined my life so far. I recently realized, and maybe some of yours too. And a final reminder, if this discussion didn't get any tears rolling for you, be kind to yourself. And of course, knock your knuckles on that keyboard if you've any thoughts, comments, concerns, or perhaps epiphanies about the ways that you disregard your own emotions. And on that note, cheers, my brave experiencers of reality, here to understand our self defenses and use them as best we can, including the realities of our own feelings. All right, y'all. Thanks for staying tuned and sticking it out through this seriously kind of emotional discussion. I felt the choking up happening. I hope that it has been helpful and enlightening. And until we speak again next time, hail yourself. Hail your feelings. You don't need good enough reasons for them, and you don't need other people to have your emotions before you're allowed to experience them as well. Also, nothing in life is good or bad except for things like abuses onto others, which are bad. Okay, that's it. Hail you, hail our feelings, hail our work in reality to get the best results possible. Hail Archie, and cheers, y'all. Talk to you soon.